Hey, Scottsdale, you ready for George Noory? Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for three-time Emmy Award winner and your host of Coast to Coast AM, Mr. George Noory. Let's...
Welcome. What a great crowd. How's everybody? Are you all avid Coast to Coast listeners? Super. By the way, thanks to Jim and Ann for putting on this incredible event. A little round of applause, Jim. A little bit later on, we're going to take some of your questions. Now, I know a lot of you are deeply into the metaphysical and the soul. How many of you believe in reincarnation? Listen to this honest-to-God story. 3-year-old boy, Golan Heights, which is, between Syria and Israel. It was part of the dispute in the '67 war. 3-year-old little boy, he's got a birthmark on his head, a long red birthmark down to here. He tells his parents, Mommy, Daddy, I was killed by an axe in the head. 3 years old. And they didn't know what to do. They took him to a doctor, and apparently it's their custom that if a little kid starts talking about stuff like that, they believe in reincarnation. So the doctor starts to talk to him and figures out the little boy wants to lead them to a graveyard where he is. And he takes them to this obscure spot and says, I'm buried right here. They call the authorities, they dig it up, and they find a skeleton of a dead man with an axe cut in his head. Absolutely unbelievable story. Then the little kid tells them, now I know where the axe is. It's buried over here. And he takes them there and they dig it up and there's the axe. Now, if that doesn't make you believe in reincarnation, nothing will. I mean, nothing. Strange things happen in life. Talk about strange things. Real life news. Does anybody know where the missing Malaysian airline plane is? My gosh. There's no debris. That's strange. But there's no doubt in my mind this thing was hijacked. I mean, it flew all over the place. If it was a suicidal pilot, he would have taken it and gone right down. He's not going to do a sightsee around the planet, which is what happened. So it's a weird thing, but the news is just strangely weird. This is a crazy planet. And thank God we have people like you who are normal. You're tuned in on things. I've always told people that the coast-to-coast audience was indeed the most tuned-in, educated audience of any radio show I've ever been associated with or have listened to myself. I mean, you folks are on it, and you ought to be congratulated for that. Thank you for you. You know what? We have now surpassed 570 radio stations. It is absolutely huge, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and we're going to continue to bring you cutting-edge programming, honesty, truth, as much as we can. You know, people have asked me, and we may do it in a Q&A, has government ever come up to you and tried to shut you down or asked you not to do this or that? Not directly. It's never happened that I know of. So there's a couple little things I wanted to go through before we get into a little Q&A with Jim and Tom and you. Somebody called the show and said, why don't you run for president? Well, I'd have to leave the radio show, so I'm not going to do that. If I could do both, I would. And they said, what's the first thing you do? And I said, well, the first thing I do is I'd abolish the IRS. I'd be done with it. Go to a fair use tax, give vouchers to people who don't have enough money, and give you 100% of your money. And so you can do what you want with it. If you want to buy a shirt and pay a little higher tax for it, that's your business, but at least it's yours. You know, the hotel must be saying, what are those people doing? What? They're looking at the clause in your contract right now, Jim. Who did we let in there? Thank you. Tell you a little funny story. When I was a kid, I used to build model rockets. Anybody ever do that when they were kids? Estes Industries, right? Little solid propellant rockets. We'd launch them, had a great time. I used to build these little rockets. They're about this high, and launch them 1,200 feet up. They'd come down with a little parachute. It was amazing. Well, I made mine with a little tiny capsule. I would build these rockets. And my best friend at the time was a fellow by the name of Gary Frank. And Gary's job was to launch the rockets. He put the little battery electrode clips on it, and it was my job to broadcast the launch to the little neighborhood group of kids. It was great. They'd all gather around, and I thought I was at mission control, and I'd go, T-minus 10, 9. And I'd get to 0, and Gary would push the button, the engines would brighten up, and off it would go. So, years later, I go into broadcasting, my love, and Gary decided to do what he loved. He built the engines for the space shuttle. Since you were little kids, things change and affect your life dramatically. They really do. And life is very special and precious when you do things like that. It's spiritual. Jim, you had a few questions for me, and then we'll get into a Q&A and have some fun here.
Well, first, I'd just like to say, George, what a brilliant voice. It is a pleasure to listen to you, and we all enjoy your program, and so thank you for that. And so the first question that I wanted to ask you is, you were involved in some of the Philadelphia experiment interviews. I think that was Al Blelik. And what was your overall opinion on that? Was it a grand hoax? Did it occur? Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, there's no question that in the 40s, the government wanted to try to cloak ships for the war. They wanted them to disappear. And they experimented with that, trying to develop some kind of a mist-type electromagnetic wave to literally make a ship disappear. They're doing that now. They've got clothes that makes you invisible, and they're doing things like that. Well, this is back in the 40s, and they didn't know what they were doing. They just experimented, and they were trying to use Tesla technology and stuff like that. A fellow by the name of Al Blelik and Duncan Cameron come along, and they claim that they were sailors on that ship, the Philadelphia, and that the Eldridge was the ship, the USS Eldridge, and that they were on it, and that they saw unbelievable things when they started the experiment, and that it jettisoned them into the future. And so we've had Al on the program. He's dead now, but he was an extremely riveting guest. Really never asked for anything. I mean, you always look for little holes, you know, how's this guy trying to profit? And he didn't. And it was just an incredible story. Well, the Duncan Cameron portion, who was supposed to be his brother, is still alive. And we almost had him scheduled 2 months ago on Coast to Coast, but he couldn't stay up that late that time. So we're going to try to get him again. But it's a very strange story that truly happened. But, you know, were sailors cut in the, stuck in the ship between two time warps and things? I don't know. I don't know about that.
One more question, and we're going to open it up to the audience. But the 911 was quite a awakening, quite an amazing event that changed the way that we look at ourselves. And you've had some fascinating interviews as to the conspiracy aspect. And I was wondering if you would share your feeling. Was Was this a conspiracy based on the interviews that you've done, the opinions that you've formulated since then? What do you think happened there?
Okay, this is my perspective, and this is based on interviewing also so many people over the years about this unbelievable tragedy. How many of you remember that day? You cannot forget that. How many of you remember Kennedy's assassination, if you're old enough? Same kind of thing. And initially, you believe the story that is given to you, right? My gosh, these terrorists are out to get us, they're attacking us, and they're doing what they're doing. With any kind of conspiracy, there are two things within it. One, incredible truth. Two, it may be too overemphasized. So you have to look for the middle ground. You have to look for what you truly believe is going on. I always ask myself, always, when something happens, first and foremost, who benefits? I do not believe in accidents. I believe in fate and that things are created. No coincidences, as you know. So the first question I asked myself, and this is back in 2001, who's benefiting from all of this? Initially, you can't tell. But then later on, you see what happens. We're going into Afghanistan. We're going into Iraq. We've created Homeland Security. We're going to take away your rights. We're going to be able to probe and investigate you more. And then you begin to realize who benefits. Now, did our government actively sit down with these 19 crazed people, assuming they were there on these planes, and plan this? No, absolutely not. This is, and I spent 9 years in the Navy, the greatest country in the world that is unfortunately run with some people who are greedy and manipulative and conniving. And those are the people we have to watch out for. So what I believe happened on 9/11, we have always had a relationship with Osama bin Laden. Always. We funneled money to him to get the Soviets out of Afghanistan. They knew him. They could talk to him anytime they wanted. I think that a group of rogue people said, you know, it's time to take over the Middle East. This is how we have to do it. We need something spectacular. It can't be just a little episode. It can't be a tiny, tragic school shooting. This has got to be big. And so I believe that some of these rogue people planned it with those crazed fundamentalists, and that's what happened on 9/11. They financed it. They knew it was happening. I've been asked many times, did the President George Bush know? Of course not. I mean, you saw his face in that schoolroom when he was told, we need you now. I mean, he was in shock. But did people above him that he worked with know about it? I think absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
So folks, if you want to raise your hand, we'll come to you, and we'll get to everybody eventually. So just raise your hands if you have a question for George.
Anything goes. No
Jim,
holds barred.
Jim, you can take that side of the room.
Yes, I'll take this side. If you have a question, we'll just start right here.
Give us your name and your city, and I'll decide if I go to a commercial or not.
Hi, George. I'm Leslie from Chicago.
You come a long way.
I have, and I'm wondering if the Illuminati have ever approached you. Did I get to it or what?
George, can you repeat the question? Some people didn't hear it.
Is it okay to answer that?
Go ahead.
I just had to check with a person I see all the time. No, you know what? In terms of have they ever approached me for anything? No. Have I had strange people show up? Yes. No question. No question.
Hey, George. I'm Eddie LeBlanc from Beaumont, Texas, and I'd like to kind of get the latest on what's going on the HARP. I know there's been a lot of people on your show discussing it and kind of what's your take on what we're doing right now and how widespread that is globally?
All right, interesting that you would say that, because when is Nick Beggett set up again, Tom?
He'll be on probably next week.
There are rumors that we are going to disband HARP. We're not going to use it anymore. We need to find that out. That may indeed be a true fact. But HARP, I think, is used. Is it weather modification? Is it communications? Is it mind manipulation? Maybe all of the above. I mean, it's a very weird setup. And there are a couple of them all around the planet now. It's not just Alaska. But they may be stopping it. And if they are, that tells me they've got a better form of doing something. Because they're just not going to give it up.
Folks, raise your hand, please, if you have a question.
Yeah, George, this is a financial question. Since you've talked to a lot of people about what's happening in the world, and a lot of us feel like this present system is not sustainable, especially the financial system. I'm curious, how do you see it unfolding as far as the unraveling of it? I mean, do you see worldwide debt forgiveness and a new currency? There's people that put things on the internet saying there's groups that have, you know, hordes of gold that'll step in and completely clear the system. I'm just wondering, because you've talked to a lot of people, how do you see it unfolding, the meltdown?
Every expert I've talked to thinks we're going to have another bubble explosion like we had in 2008. Unfortunately, I don't think we can sustain that, but that they think is going to happen. And what I feel and what I see right now is this disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and it's continuing to grow further and further away. I have never in my life seen a situation where more people are financially strapped than ever before. Have you? I mean, it's unbelievable. I think, to answer your question, we are in for a major implosion. And it may end the dollar as the currency, the world currency, and we may go to this uniform world currency and do away with everything else. And already what they want is to go to a cashless society, embed you with a chip, and you will do all your buying, shopping, goods and services just like they said in the Bible. It's uncanny. It's going to be interesting. FEMA camps, exactly. We'll be seeing you there with me. We'll do the show there. You know. Yes, follow up. Great idea, but the greedy people won't let that happen. I mean, I would love that to happen. Your cars, payments are gone. You've got all done. I also thought what we should have done, instead of bailing out all these banks and everybody else, is give every taxpayer $100,000 in some voucher that you could only use to buy goods made in the United States, for example. They'd have a whole list of stuff. You know, do something to jumpstart the economy. I'll tell you one thing I would do. The Alaska pipeline oil, I would sell all the oil all the time to reduce our trillions of dollars of debt. And then once that was gone, go into a nationwide profit sharing and give everybody an interest in the oil, and you'd get a check every year. You know what? Whatever it was, 50,000, 100,000. I don't see anything positive coming from this. I don't think there's going to be some light at the end of the tunnel economically. Somebody's going to profit on this. Great plan, great idea. You should be my Treasury Secretary. You don't.
Hi, George. My name's Scott Filling from the Plains, Virginia.
Hi,
I love
Scott.
your show.
Thank you.
I also watch you on Guyam TV. You're really good. Thank you. And
BeyondBelief.com.
this gentleman here as well.
Free for 10 days.
Yep.
There's my plug. Cheap, but my plug.
So you cover a lot of topics, of which I have not the time to watch it all, but you know I do try to catch as much as I can. And I think one thing that has the interest of a lot of these people and many of your viewers is this topic of Atlantis. And I think what intrigues everybody about Atlantis is they had that technology where we blended in with nature, and we got away from all of this, you call it system that kind of maybe enslaves us, the carbon, you know, all the cars and things that are not in line with the earth and things like that, so to speak. And I've heard a few shows where you talk about big government, and there's like 1% that's in charge and kind of controlling the group. And I'm wondering, over time, because I can't keep up with all your shows, do you see a shift of the people starting to have effect on that smaller control group?
It's happening right now. I mean, that's why you feel these things are happening so quickly. They feel us breathing down their necks, and they're panicking. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who used to work with the Carter administration, and he's part of the Council on Foreign Relations, said a few years ago, they're on to us. They know what we want to do, and they feel it. And I think in the long run, people will say, enough is enough, just like I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And they're going to put their foot down and start fighting back. We're starting right today, as we speak. There's a march against Monsanto and GMO foods worldwide. Worldwide. You know, what are you hiding, companies, if you don't want to label your food as genetically modified? What are you hiding? You know that if there's 2 tomatoes at a grocery store, and one says, grown naturally, and the other says, genetically altered, which one are you going to take? They know that, and they're petrified on that, but people are fighting back, and it's going to happen.
I'm Sam Watkins from Kauai, Hawaii.
Hey, hello, Sam. Long way.
Yes, and we are in the midst of a battle to rid ourselves of Monsanto
You sure
and Syngenta, and we have a good movement on our island. I was going to ask you what's your take on that, but you jumped the gun on me.
I read your mind, Sam. I knew you were there. Aloha.
Aloha.
Where's Dr. Sky, by the way? Is Dr. Sky in the house? Stephen, come on up here for a second. When you listen to Coast, and I do astronomy shows, and we talk about meteor showers and comets, I call on the astronomer, Stephen Cates, Dr. Sky. Here he is.
Thank you. Pleasure, George.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
And there's something going on this weekend, which was a dud last night.
Absolutely, George. It's a privilege and honor to be here. As science meets spirituality, I want to welcome each and every one of you to this most miraculous conference. As George was mentioning, when we have issues that relate to astronomy, space, and aviation and weather, George kindly calls on me to talk about these wonderful realms. And last night, the whole world, I'm sure, was listening to Coast. And interestingly enough, we were telling people that there'd probably be, anywhere from 100 to maybe 1,000 meteors per hour shooting out of the northern part of the sky. Unfortunately, we didn't have much of a sky show. But don't let that deter you, folks, because according to other reliable sources, there may be another set of ribbons of material from this comet 209P Linear. So simply keep your eyes to the skies. And some of the things, and I have to thank George, and first, ladies and gentlemen, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, we've been doing this on Coast to Coast for quite a long time. I've been privileged and honored to write when the After Dark magazine was there. Let's put our hands together for George Noory for doing all he does to open up the minds of all the people that listen to this great radio show.
Thank you all.
And I wanted to just bring this whole conference into perspective. I just walked in, and I want to thank you very humbly from me to all of you. Again, welcome. But as an astronomer, for many, many years, I've been searching the nighttime skies in the traditional mathematical equations. 1 and 1 equals 2. And as you know, many of the astronomers of today simply think in terms of what's on a piece of paper. But I'm so fascinated when I look at the sky, and I had a revelation when I was in college back and visiting Dr. Carl Sagan. I had the privilege and honor of meeting Carl at Cornell University, and I sat there and listening to him was just so impacting when he said to me, you know, Steve, remember, the Earth is simply the pale blue dot. As we look into the vast cosmos, this tiny little speck of solar driftwood among the billions of other stars, as we all know. But my revelation or catharsis came when I continued on with my education and learning about the different mechanics and things that take place in the heavens. And the most impacting one was when back in 1995, when we discovered the first exosolar planet. Folks, we thought all the way to the end of the solar system that that's the end pretty much of planetary science. How wrong we were. It's just so fascinating to know that well over 1,500 planetary bodies which may be similar to the Earth in their substance, of maybe the same phenomenon of life, maybe not in the carbon sense like we are, but it opened up my eyes, ladies and gentlemen, to a most prolific thing. That if you look and take the simple number of a light year, 5,880,000,000,000 miles, and you look at the North Star, where the meteors were coming from, and you know that's 430 light years away, you just know that the universe is just so ever expanding. But I think this, to me, is the most profound thing that ever opened my mind. Of all the universe that we see, the material world, of all the things that are here, we only see somewhat less than 20% of this entire universe. What is dark matter? What is dark energy? So the simple point is, folks, what our eyes tell us is really not the whole story, as we know. And from the world of ufology, I remember interviewing my first UFO guest way back in college, and it was Betty Hill of the Great Encounter that happened. Phenomenal stories. And then stories like that. And the most profound one that I can think of, folks, is the 1967 event that happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base, when 5 missile silos that were ready to go at moment's notice in our defense triad. This particular series of events took place where a blue object, some sort of an orb, hovered over these entire silos and systematically, one after another, shut them down. What could do that? A most amazing story. In the world of defense, it's called a fated giant. And to this day, nobody's been able to explain. So my simple message is, we open up our minds, our hearts, the combination and connectivity of science and spirituality, what you're all here to celebrate and share among the many people that are here today. I'm grateful and thank you for having me as a part of your show. I do a show called A Call to Rights, which talks about the infringement that the federal government has on us as human beings. We're free. I think Edward Snowden's got it right. And ladies and gentlemen, keep up the good fight. Thank you so much.
A lot of you are interested in self-healing, right? You're going to love this story. 12 years ago, I'm in St. Louis. I'm at one of my favorite restaurants at the time and talking to a friend who's a bartender. And I come up to him, and his name is Butch. And I said, Butch, how you doing? He went, oh, not well. I said, what's wrong? He says, I've got throat cancer. 6 weeks to go. 6 weeks? What do you mean 6 weeks? They've given me 6 weeks, and that's it. I said, what the heck are you doing working? He says, I need the money. I said, geez, Butch, I don't know what overcame me, but I held it, and I felt this incredible burst of energy, just incredible. And I gave him a hug, and I went back to Los Angeles, and I figured the next time I'm in St. Louis, he'll be gone. I basically said goodbye to him. Well, I came back in 2 months, went back to the restaurant to find out what happened to Butch, because nobody had called me, and he's still there. I said, Butch, you said 6 weeks. He said, George, it's gone. I said, what's gone? He said, the tumor. It's gone. I said, what do you mean it's gone? What happened? He said, you did this. I said, Butch, I didn't do anything. He said, 3 days after you touched me, I went back in for my final scope. It was gone. The doctor's in shock. He doesn't know what happened. They thought, did they even misdiagnose me? And he pulled out all his old x-rays and charts, and no, there's the nodule. It's right there. It's gone. He came on my show, talked about healing. He's still alive to this day. It's an amazing story. I don't know what overcame me. I'm not going to take the credit for it. But all I know is when I was touching him, I felt the biggest burst of something crackling through my hand. And something happened there. What a story, huh?
Hey, George. Ted Wozniak, Pagosa Springs. Actually, can you elaborate on the SIRA, National Economic Security Reformation Act? I understand it was signed into
It's
law.
been signed into law, and again, it's the infringement of control. Everything. The right to monitor bank accounts, you, and everything else. I mean, Why are they so obsessed with this? Did you ever get a bank loan? Go get a little bank loan. And you have to give them your driver's license. They have to have a picture, or you can't get that loan anymore. I finally asked the bank officer, what is this for? And he said, Homeland Security requires it. What? So you don't take money and send it to some terrorist organization. It's unbelievable. But it is law, and they're going to implement it whenever they can. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Susie Kinnear, and I'm from the city of Orange in California.
Susie, I'm going blind. Oh, there you are.
I have two questions. We've had two hearings for disclosure of our extraterrestrial neighbors, friends. We've also had proven cover-ups of NASA footage where, starships were docked with the International Space Station. I want to know what you feel will bring this to a worldwide public acknowledgement of starships and basically break those agreements that were made in Area 51 that didn't represent the humanity. And my second question is about chemtrails. Where do you think it stems from, based on your interviews and the people you've talked to, and what will it take to stop it? I myself am shocked that people in neighborhoods that know the pilots, the crew, the people that supply the chemicals haven't just put their boot on the neck of those people.
Chemtrails are real, folks. They're up there. You wake up in the morning and it's crystal clear and you've got a gorgeous blue sky, and by the afternoon you could play tic-tac-toe up there. And these aren't just jet trails, because the next day you may have clear skies all day, and the jet patterns are the same. All those flights that happened on Monday are the same on Tuesday and on Wednesday. So if you were going to get jet trails, you'd get them all the time. We're not. We're getting systematic chemtrails dropped in on us for whatever purpose. I think it's weather manipulation and modification. The planet's just too screwed up right now. Too many screwy things are happening. Are they trying to dumb us down with spraying us with Prozac or something like that to keep us calm? That's another possibility. I can't rule that out. But they are indeed spraying something. As far as disclosure, I have told Stephen Bassett this many times. I don't think government is going to willingly disclose anything to us. We literally are probably going to have to see this thing on our morning news just hovering over a major city. That's probably the only way we're going to find out about it.
George, Beverly Taylor from Vermont.
Hello, Bev.
And I stood up to brag that Vermont passed the first GMO labeling bill last week.
Good for you.
And
good for you.
Woo! It was a very tough struggle. The governor had been bullied by Monsanto about a year and a half ago that Monsanto would break the state financially. And he backed off. And the citizens of Vermont stood up, particularly an organization called Vermont PERG. And we said, we're going ahead anyway. And we have. And we were sued, of course, the next day by Monsanto, the Grocery Manufacturers Association. But I guess I'm not asking a question so much as just saying, I'm hoping that other states will do the same thing now, because we stood up and we're the first one.
And I think that will start happening.
Yeah.
It will start happening. And of course, I mean, you all know the real reason for genetically modified foods. It's not to enhance the crop and make more. It's to control the seeds. It's to sell the seeds every year on an ongoing basis. In the old days, farmers would get seeds from their own crops and hold some back. And sure, they'd go to the seed mill and buy some more, but it was all done naturally. They can't do that anymore. Every year, you want to plant corn, you got to go to your feed shop and buy the seed that was produced by Monsanto, and that's how they make money. On the scale of it corporately, it was a brilliant plan, except they forgot the people are as mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. Yes, sir.
George, my name is Ramon Gokon from Toronto. And, you know, to me, it seems like the world is unconscious, asleep.
You're right. Not this room, but the world is.
The world is. And, you know, so much is going on. We've mentioned, you know, Monsanto, finance, chemtrails, HARP, you know, medicine, pharma. You can go on and on and on. And 50 years ago, people would have just woken up and said, we're not going to take it anymore. And yet, life just seems to carry on. So what is it going to take for people to really shake up and wake up? Because the time is coming when, you know, they may lose whatever little freedom they have left unless they really do wake up. So what is it that's causing, or who are the powers that be that are actually managing, controlling us, putting us in a state of fear so that we cannot move, or we totally remain unconscious and take total disregard of the things going on around us?
The power brokers on this planet neglected one thing when they were putting this plan together. They forgot about the power of the internet and the ability for people to instantly communicate with each other, to get information. Heck, when Michael Jackson died, more people knew about it than most news people. That's how fast things traveled. They didn't anticipate that. When you start seeing the internet shutting down in certain locations, you're going to really realize that they're starting to scramble. But when are people going to wake up? I think they are. I think every day now you're going to see more and more people question and be upset and scare the heck out of elected officials to try to start doing the right thing. We are in a battle between the New World Order folks and to us. And it's not going to come easy. I mean, this could be a 10-year battle, back and forth, and manipulation and stuff like that, controlling stuff. Let's run the price of oil up so high we crush these people, you know, and that's what they want to do. But it's starting. People are aware. The mere fact that you are all here tells me that you're all aware. The mere fact that a program like mine could continue to get bigger and bigger tells me that people have had enough.
Hi, George. My name is Greg Presto, and I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona.
Hi there.
And I have a question. There's a House bill that was passed in 2010, takes effect July 1st, and affects the banking system with money that goes in and outside the country. Have you heard anything about that? And I have one other question. When are you going to have Lindsey Williams back on?
Lindsey was on with me about a year ago, so he's getting close, I think. He's good. You liked him?
Yes. I heard him kind of on a YouTube video, and he said that once some things transact here, and they're going to probably be pretty soon, he's not going to talk anymore. So
Interesting.
He's not allowed to.
We'll get him to talk.
So,
in terms of the banking, the banking regulations, they want to do whatever they can to make it easier for the banks to control your money, to, you know, have you pay extra fees for international transfers and things like that, and to monitor where this money's coming from all the time.
Well, they have a thing where the taxing, if they don't report the money, and this is from companies, I mean, like China, who sells us goods, if they don't report their income and all this stuff to the U.S., they get a 33% penalty on their stuff. This is all slated. It was in a House bill from 2010. Takes effect July 1st, and it's going to shoot the prices of things up. And you probably won't see this until September. And Lindsey Williams has a lot of information on that. So.
Okay. It's all about the money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always is. It doesn't exist. What a great business they have, right? They make money without having any. How do we get into this? Just keep your hands up if you want, if you have a question. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, you're holding the mic, aren't you? No, the guy who's got the mic.
We'll get up to him in a second.
My staff is out of control.
Sir, we'll come to you in 1 second.
Hi, George. Blair from Sedona.
Hey, Blair, how are you?
I'm doing really good.
You called last night.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
We only allow a call every 30 days, Blair. You're finished.
I got to admit, I've been very lucky. Tom Danheiser acts more like an agent for me than a line producer, you know. Even thank you, Tommy. How's Ian doing? Ian Punnett. You know, his cantankerous spirit really kept me awake on Saturday nights, like your bright, airy mainstreaming of the night does during the week. And one of the things that I liked about Ian, I disagreed with him a lot of the times, but he kept me awake, and I was listening to him. So how's he doing health-wise right now?
I had him on a couple weeks ago for a quick health update. The tinnitus is bad, and it has probably been a career killer for him. And he's gone back to school. He's in Arizona now, as a matter of fact, and you know, working on an advanced degree. But I think, based on him, his broadcast days are over. He can't hear anymore.
So the tinnitus is something that is almost terminal in his world, right?
For his career. Yep.
Oh dear. Thanks, George.
Okay, Blair. Good to see you in person. Of course, we met before in my studio, didn't we? Weren't you in Sherman Oaks? Yeah. I remember that. I very rarely forget a face. Yes, sir. Hi, Tom.
Okay, I'm John Atwood, clinical psychologist from Oklahoma, and I'm wondering what's going to happen to the Mexican mafia when pot becomes legal. But another problem with pot that's never talked about, Dr. Daniel Amen, who does all the SPEC studies for the ADHD kids, has shown a lot of brain damage with continued use of pot, and that's never brought up. I like pot, I'm not against it, but it is really dangerous.
Well, and again, it's all about the money. Believe me, when it becomes legalized all around the country, they're going to tax the heck out of it, and they're going to make a fortune doing it. You know, I don't advocate drugs for anybody, but I do think we should legalize it so we don't put people in jail for these petty crimes like that. But in terms of the medical purposes, you're absolutely right. We haven't really looked at the long-term damage on things like that. I mean, for example, cell phones. As some of you know, my sister's been battling stage 4 brain cancer, and she should have passed on a year ago. She's still fighting the good fight. She had a tumor on the left side of her head, and she used to talk with her cell phone for 3 hours a day to her daughters and her friends on the left side. Studies are saying that it's not good for you, that it could cause cancer, but the world doesn't talk about it. You watch NBC or CBS or ABC, and they have a Verizon commercial in their news. So they're not gonna tell you that cell phones cause cancer.
Hi, George. I'm Sherry from Scottsdale. I wanted to know, have you ever had any guests who have had actual contact with ETs or something like the Dolce place in New Mexico or anything like that? Have you heard from anyone who's actually had contact?
Yes, now, has it happened? That's between the guest, I guess, and his God. But we have had a number of guests on over the years who claim that they've been visited, they've been abducted, they've had contact. So yes, we have, with really some compelling stories. Travis Walton being one of them.
My name is Pat Hans. I'm from Mesa, Arizona, and I'd like to talk about food or have somebody bring me up to date on food.
All right.
I remember many years ago when they began genetic engineering of food, and the reason part of that was for population was also exploding, and that without the modification, there wouldn't be enough food to feed the populations that were beginning to explode. Now, where is all of that today, and does anybody know about the food supply?
It was a great excuse to scare people to agreeing, hey, this genetically modified food is going to be good for us, because we now can feed a planet of 7 billion and then 10 billion, and we're going to be able to get all that done. It was a bunch of hooey to be able to make money, to control the seeds, and to sell them, and that's where it is. Yet the public and governments took it. They took it as face value.
Well, I remember people who also believed they were. So what happened? I mean, some of those people I know are now dead, and they're not here to talk about it, but at the time, it was firmly believed that without that, we couldn't survive. So how does this become a conspiracy?
In any course of an event, you're going to have dedicated, hardworking, honest people there. Some of them eventually stumble into the truth. Others simply don't. Some of them say, look, we're going to genetically modify these seeds because instead of having 3 tomatoes on a vine, we're going to have 8. And it's happening, look. But they don't look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, wait a minute, who sells the seeds? And who controls the seeds? And who owns them? And how does that happen? Because in the past, this was Mother Nature. It's not happening that way anymore. So to answer your question, there are well-intentioned people who care. Scientists, doctors, engineers. They think they're doing the right thing, but they don't see the bigger picture. They really don't. Some of us do. Do they? I think some of them are starting to. They become whistleblowers. Edward Snowden. I'm sure when he went into this job he had, he didn't think he was going to be revealing secrets of the NSA. But once he got into it, he realized, you know what? There's something wrong here. And he had the guts to do it. Not a lot of people do. If you've got a $200,000 a year bioengineering degree and you're paying, and you've got a great job, you may keep your mouth quiet.
So we're going to have 3 more questions. Okay. Then after that, everyone that would like to meet George personally, have him sign something, just line up on that side of the room. Tom will show you where to start the line. And George has graciously agreed to stay here and greet as many people as would like
until the last person stand.
And I will also add, we will begin tonight as scheduled with Dr. Ramon Gokon and then Richard C. Hoagland.
And one quick thing, when you talk about the last person standing, Tom and I, a couple of years ago, we were at a banquet. And some guy came up to me and he said, hey, do you mind if, we talk about this UFO case and da-da-da? And Tom said, George would be glad to talk to you after the banquet's done. Because we were sitting down, we were eating. He said, oh, okay. He stood right behind me with his arms folded for the whole banquet. I mean, he was like 2 inches away from me. Hello.
Hi, George. My name is Jerry, and I come from Crown Point, Indiana, by way of Chicago.
Well, that's a great long trip.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say you have a fantastic memory, and I'm really astounded about all the things that you reflect on sometimes when you're talking. I just wanted to know, is there one particular guest that you interviewed that really stands out in your mind?
Well, Jerry, there is one. I like almost all my guests. The ones I don't like, when I'm doing 3-hour shows and you ask them this great question and they go, here's an example. So when you guys captured Bigfoot, what did you do with him? And the answer for a 3-hour show is nothing. Well, what did you do with him afterwards? Not much. Those I don't like. But most of them I do. But the one I remember the most was an old gent by the name of Benjamin Krem, who claims that he represented a fellow by the name of the Maitreya, who was an individual who lived in London. And while Benjamin's on talking about the Maitreya and how godly he was and how he was going to save the planet, I start getting messages from our listeners. We've got a system where you can send me an instant message. And they're saying, George, he's talking about the Antichrist. And I go online while I'm interviewing him, and it says Maitreya, the future Antichrist. I'm going, holy Toledo. I'm interviewing a guy who represents the Antichrist, but he seems so nice and pleasant. So I'm questioning him about the Antichrist, and he starts getting a little testy. People start writing in saying, get him off the air, I don't feel good. And I'm going, wow. So the more I interview the guy, as you well know, I very rarely take a vacation. I've been doing Coast to Coast now for 2003, 11 straight years. I have taken one one-week vacation in 11 years. If I took everything I'm entitled to, I'd be gone for 22 years. And then I'd come back. Very rarely do I take a sick day. I've missed 2 days in 11 years. One, I had a horrible fever, and the other, I swallowed pizza rolls, and my throat blew up. I couldn't even hardly breathe. So I don't get sick. And I'm on the air interviewing Benjamin, and I'm getting queasy. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm sick too. I said, there's something wrong here. And he's still talking about the Maitreya, and he's going to come and save the planet, and if people are interested, you know, here's my email address, and here's my website, and the Maitreya has the power to beam himself wherever he wants. Might be here now, for all I know. And I went to a commercial, and I said, Tom, I don't feel very good. And he said, dump him. I said, what do you mean dump him? He said, trust me, you'll feel better. Dump him. Because he wasn't feeling good either. So I said, we went back, and we went to open lines. I said, Mr. Krem, thank you for your interview, and I have a way about me where they've been dumped and they don't know it. As a matter of fact, he's probably still on hold somewhere thinking he's coming back on. And that was years ago. All of a sudden, people are sending me messages saying they're feeling better. And I was too. And you were too, Tom. Strange. So here, I will always remember that guy. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, George. I'm Reverend Patricia Johnston from Sacramento, California. And my question has to do with remote viewing. We know that the government and the SRI started this advanced training program for the Cold War, whatever. And then the Cold War ended, and so they conveniently shut down remote viewing. Now, I'm a remote viewer, and to me, this is the greatest scientific breakthrough ever. It totally merges science and spirituality. We go interdimensional, we see the ETs, we see our dear ones, we see the angels, we see all of that. And all of these scientific people and the CIA and military people, they have been writing books about this now for the last 15 years, that it's all real, folks. And that we can bilocate and we can travel, you know, to other places for real and get information. Now, why would the government then say, we're closing it down?
Did they?
I mean, you know, it's the greatest
Let's assume that those who are in the remote viewing program, Ingo Swann, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, Paul Smith, Ed Dames, let's assume those guys didn't want to play ball with the government. Maybe the government wanted remote viewing used in a different way. And so these guys all say, you know what? Let's just disband this. We don't want anything to do with it. I think the government got rid of them and has a different program ongoing, and it's a little more nefarious. I really do.
My second part of that is, so Major Ed Dames is now training people again in the private sector. And he's talking about that they've done these blind studies of his top remote viewers, that they're getting the kill shot. I'm sure some of you have heard about that. No, what is the point of that? If there's nothing we can do about the kill shot, why keep training people for something that they can't undo? Unless,
well, I guess he feels he has an obligation to tell people. As he admitted on the program, he's off on his dates. He can't predict the dates. He needs something, you know, maybe when you remote view, if you see a car license plate that says 2019 on it, you know a date. You said, oh my gosh, look, I'm in that time period. But without any reference, he has no idea where he is anymore. But he does believe that this kill shot, this solar event that's going to occur is going to be huge. I think he's right. I think it's a matter of time that an X-flare that we have been very lucky to dodge is going to be right aligned with us, and poof, there goes the grid, as we've warned people for years, and it'll be too late.
So we will do our last question, a one-part question, and and I just want to remind you again, we will stay on schedule. Please be here at 6:30, so you're welcome and invited to line up behind Tom after this question. And again, we want to give our heartfelt thanks to George Noory.
I'll have some closing remarks right after this question. Hi.
Hi, George. My name is Sandy.
You look like Judy Garland, doesn't she?
Thank you.
Can you think somewhere over the rainbow? Just a little bit for us?
I love The Wizard of Oz. I'm from Santa Rosa, California. My question probably touches more directly on a lot of us here in terms of your ability to reach people around the country, in terms of enlisting people in a moment or 2 moments or minutes of group consciousness, group meditation, and the effect that that has. And I believe you've done that kind of an experiment on your program. And I would also like to suggest that perhaps we could all do that here to bring rain to Sedona so that we could all go there Monday. But the power of that, and if you would remark on that.
The power is amazing. Controlling it is something else. We've done experiments. We've made it rain when it was a drought, except it didn't stop raining. We've had events like that. We need to learn how to control it a little better. Lynn McTaggart, who wrote the book The Field, has been pretty good about that. And she would be worth our while to work with to try to control some of these things. But there's no doubt the power of the human mind collectively can do some incredible, incredible things. Truly can. I'll tell you a funny story. Glynis McCants, the numbers lady, you talk about the power of the mind and numbers. She said, put a number 8 in your wallet and you'll find newfound riches. And so I told a friend of mine who was working in a restaurant in Los Angeles, his name was George Poulos, old George. And George used to go to the casinos out there near the Indian reservations. And I said, just put a number 8 in your wallet and see what happens. Let's test it. So he did. He goes out and plays slots, comes back the next day. He says, George, I won $1,250. Unbelievable. Playing penny slots. I'm going back tonight. I said, George, I don't think the number 8 was supposed to be for greed. Take the $1,250 and be happy. He went back and lost it all. There's a moral here for stuff like that. So, before we start the meet and greet, are we done with the Q&A? I want to thank all of you for coming here. Fantastic people. Thank you again, Jim, for inviting me. Do you do this every year? You do this every year?
We do. This is our second annual event here in Scottsdale, and we do about 3 of these a year. We'd love to have you back.
All right, you got it. You got a deal.
my name is James Tyberonn with Earthkeeper, and I am here in Scottsdale, Arizona with three of our keynote speakers and featured guests, Dr. Robert Schoch, John Van Auken, the Executive Director of the Edgar Cayce Foundation and ARE, and George Noory from Coast to Coast AM. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you
Great
so
to be
much
here
for
with
being
you.
Here at this time. It feels like family. It does. I really appreciate and acknowledge the different contributions that all three of you make in different areas of what we might call the consciousness movement, the awakening of the earth. So many people thought that 2012 was going to be the end all, and it seems, John, you've spoken a lot, and I've spoken a lot about 2038 based on Edgar Cayce information. Can you share a little bit about that and your new book, 2038?
Edgar Cayce saw the prophecy in the Great Pyramid in Giza. It was public knowledge in the 1800s, and a lot of people published information about it, but it was sort of seen as a little bit on the fringe element, so it did not survive into the 1900s so much. But Edgar Cayce, when he was giving one of his in-depth readings about the future, referenced the prophecy in the Great Pyramid at Giza, and that it flows with the movement through the pyramid right into the king's chamber and up to the apex above the king's chamber, and that the date that measures at that apex is the year 2038, and that this prophecy is concluded then, and the earth begins a new era, and we begin to have a new body type gradually evolve, in which there are 12 chakras, and he goes on in greater detail with all of it. So that's how that all started, was picking up on this prophecy that was discovered a long time ago, but was not really popular during the 1900s. And now it's starting to regain awareness by people, and that it might be an effective date to look at.
Wow. George, did you ever have the opportunity to talk to Carl Sagan, the author of Cosmos?
Of all the people I wanted to interview, Jim, in my broadcast career, he was the one that I did not. He died a little too early in life, and I didn't have that chance.
One of the interesting things that Sagan came up with, and I think this was in the early 80s, late 70s, was that John just mentioned the possibility of a new body type. And Carl Sagan came up with the idea that the only viable base that the human body could be based on other than carbon was silicon.
That's right.
It was four valence.
That's right.
Which would tie in with this idea of the human body changing form maybe to some sort of crystalline base, because silicon dioxide is quartz.
Well, they have talked that if there's not a carbon-based life form on other planets, that it could exactly be silicon.
Really?
And I had a difficult time trying to understand that. I mean, are we seeing people who look like glass? Are you going to see their hearts ticking away like a back of a watch?
Yes.
And the physicist said, no, it's not that. But it's just a different form of a life system. So that's very possible.
That's amazing. And in the last talk that we were given, you mentioned that you were aware, Robert, of the work of Dr. J. Alford, who talked about photonic life, bioplasmic life. What do you think about that?
I think that something that we have to be very clear about is what is life and how do we define life.
Yes.
And this gets into the bigger issue of consciousness, and I believe some very good arguments are being made now by top-rated physicists that consciousness may exist within non-carbon-based organisms that we're familiar with, and that consciousness, some put it in terms of a quantum phenomenon. That's basically a quantum phenomenon which you could have, say, in a plasma, electrically charged set of particles.
Yes.
You could potentially have in a crystal structure, and I'm thinking of carbon-based life, as we know it, has one time frame, but silicon-based life form may actually be interacting and thinking, if you would, consciousness, but at a different time frame, which may be very hard for us to recognize. Because for them, what's for us a long period of time may be a moment in time, and vice versa. And if you have, say, plasma-based are other types of consciousness and what should be considered life forms. Again, their time frames may be very discordant with our time frame. So it might be incredibly difficult on some levels to even recognize them as living organisms because we're so based, we're so used to being carbon-based organisms and thinking our time frame.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating concept. We were talking, I think someone asked George a question a while ago, and Graham Hancock was here last year, and we were talking about the potentials of time travel, of people, of the nature of time, of the torus aspect, where in the physical realm, space is fixed and time flows, and on the other side, time is fixed and space flows.
Exactly.
And we were talking about the potential of people from the future coming back, or that there could be possible areas of intervention. And one thing that always struck me as the possibility of that, I'd like to get each of your ideas on. And the Spanish Armada, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, was an incredible incident. It was Queen Elizabeth in England, and it was Philip in Spain, who had a massive army, a massive navy, and he carried the seeds of the Spanish Inquisition in the bellies of those boats. And it should have been an absolute defeat. And had Philip had conquered, have taken England and taken Elizabeth out, North America, and I lived in South America 9 years, North America would be North-South America. It would be a bunch of chopped up countries with an aristocracy.
And you would not be speaking English right now.
We would not be speaking English, and we would either be one of the haves or the have-nots with a 95% chance on the have-not. And so, in a real way, if the planet is progressing, despite our faults, the United States has played a major role in that, in the consciousness of it. Could it be that something remarkable happened in the defeat of the Spanish Armada, where all of these 600 boats were destroyed, and that changed history, that allowed this to happen, that stopped the Spanish Inquisition, which was more than it may have appeared to me. The Spanish Inquisition, I think, was darkness. It was evil. It was, that duality aspect of good versus evil. It was a really terrible thing.
Yeah.
And And do you think that there is potential that enlightened beings from the future are our evolved souls that come back and allow certain probable realities to take a certain path?
I think that there is very good, because this is something I've become very interested in, have been studying, and the evidence for it, so real hard data, and also the theoretical physics behind it, that the future, I don't want to say the future is fixed, we still have free will, so it's very hard, difficult to deal with, but there is definitely things from the future can influence the past, and this has been demonstrated empirically, that it can happen both at macroscopic level and microscopic or subatomic level. There have been some very famous studies now, which the conventional scientists have tried to dismiss. But for instance, something as simple as a person studying for an exam after the exam and statistically doing better if they don't know how they did on the exam. Yeah, so once you fix the future and you know how you did on the exam, it's not going to change. But this is statistically rigorous studies where students were given exams, very simple exams, for instance, memorizing lists of words, that type of thing. Then they study for it after the fact, after they took the exam, but before they know the results, and they would actually statistically do better. So it seems that their studying in the future went back into the past. So, and there's theoretical, physics, cutting-edge theoretical physics that suggests that things in the future can affect the past, or as some physicists would say, it's not so much affecting the past, but things in the future are pooling us. So the pool of the future. So it's not that the future is absolutely fixed, but it's not just a total blank slate either, and it can have a reverse effect.
Of course, remember the old saying, you cannot go back into time and affect things. The grandfather paradox.
Yeah.
If you go back into time and kill your grandfather,
Yeah.
what have you done to your existence?
Exactly.
Are you still there or are you gone? Yeah. If there's going to be time travel in the future, and I think one day there will be, 100 years, 10,000 years, who knows? Will they come back and try to alter events? Will they go back to the time of Jesus and try to stop him from being put on the cross? I would think that he would say, don't stop this. You don't have any idea what you're doing. Can you go back and get rid of Hitler? Can you go back and change a pitcher in a World Series game? I'm not sure you can do that. I don't think you have that ability to alter those kinds of events.
But on the other hand, what's happening now can be, and I believe there's empirical and theoretical evidence that what's happening now is in part being affected by what certain aspects
I think
of
the
future.
present can affect the future. I'm not sure the future can affect the past.
And that brings up a really interesting idea, because you're probably familiar with the Seth material written by
Yes.
Shane Roberts. Seth says that all there is the now.
Yeah.
And that what appears to be our linear past, and this is from Seth Speaks, can be changed if our present attitudes change.
Mm-hmm.
That, for example, if something happens in which we hurt someone, we embarrass someone, we make ourselves look foolish, and the memory of that makes us guilty, makes us feel terrible. He provides a process where you can go in and imagine that it didn't happen that way, that you did the right thing. And he says, and this is fascinating, that it actually changes the past, because the past is just one of several probabilities.
Well, this gets into something that you were just talking about, George, and I think an important distinction is what is the past. There are certain things I agree with you, that the past is fixed. Once it's fixed, you can't change it. But interesting, and we don't have the proper terminology for it, certain things in the past, what we consider the past, aren't actually fixed.
It's not the past. It may not be the past.
That may not be the past, and we may have assumptions about what the past is, but it hasn't been fixed yet. And getting back to my very simple example, which I've looked at the studies, and I believe they've been replicated several times, with students studying for an exam after the fact. If they knew the results of the exam, it fixed the past, or if anyone knew the results. But as long as they were unfixed, there was a certain level of malleability that was still there. But once you, quote, know the past, then it's fixed, it's not changeable.
There is a windy road in Los Angeles, and I'm leaving Beverly Hills to head for Sherman Oaks, which is where my radio studio is. And as I'm weaving around this curve, I'm thinking to myself, George, you're kind of close to the lane on the left. You're really close. You're not over the line, but you're really close, and you're giving no wiggle room to somebody if they come over. And so I, for a moment, I took a glimpse into the future and saw myself getting hit.
Exactly.
And I decided, pull way over. And sure enough, as I'm making these turns, a car comes by, and it really would have been too close.
Exactly. And see, this
and it could have
the
had,
whole issue of precognition and premonitions, and I mean,
So did I alter the future?
Yeah.
I think I did, Robin. I think I did.
Yeah. So I mean, there is, again, that malleability. And there's some very interesting work at a quantum level. At a quantum level, there is no present, ultimately. There's the past and the future, and there's this bleeded, sort of in-between gray area. But what we think of as the present doesn't really exist.
That's
it's
fascinating.
it's incredible.
Well, I have one question I want to direct to John, and all of you have read Edgar Cayce, and this is an incredible man, incredible body that has influenced so many people, myself, and Casey spoke about him having achieved a lifetime of mastery as Rata in Egypt, thousands of years ago, literally an ascended master. And in his life as Edward Casey, he speaks about the lifetime previous to that as a roguish Western man named Bainbridge. It was a gambler. And so here's my question for John and for both of you, George and Robert. If reincarnation exists, as I believe it does, as Edward Casey explains, are lifetimes linear? Because if Edward Casey had his ascended master lifetime in Egypt, and then in the late 1800s was this rogue, was this roguish person in Missouri or wherever it was in the United States an earlier lifetime than the one that was the ascended master? So do lifetimes occur in linear sequence, or do we sit on the other side in which time doesn't exist and just pick this one and that one and this one?
That gets into the whole business of time.
Yeah.
And when you say linear, we still are trapped in this, okay, this, and that's past to present to future, but maybe it's not quite so simple.
You know, Kurt Vonnegut's novel,
right?
Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah.
The guy
Great work.
Great stuff. He says that these people from another planet come, and when they look at a human, they say a human with baby legs on one end and old man legs on the other end. It looks like a centipede, as big as the span of the Rocky Mountains, and that all of that lifetime is occurring at once. It's just one being. So it's a fascinating topic. It's an interesting thought on whether lifetimes can just dip into certain time frames or time holograms, as Seth refers to it.
And it gets back to what we were talking about before. We're in this one time frame where we even recognize life forms in different time frames.
Casey gave the example of a river, and that life is a river. And when you're down on the timeline of the river, you can only see a little ways into the future and a little ways back. But like the Egyptian concept of the falcon or Horus, the higher mind, if you rise above it, you see the whole of the river and can affect any area on the river. And the reason you can have a very elevated incarnation as Rata and then have a very earthy, roguesque incarnation as Bainbridge is because the soul wants to experience the whole of the potential of the psyche so that the light can be shined in every corner of its psyche, and it knows its dark side and its light side, has experienced it, and so that's soul development of the higher mind, seeing the whole flow, and even depth psychologists say that the more enlightened you become, the more vulnerable you are to your dark side. Wow. And that in approaching your dark side and facing it comes your greatest strength out of it once you see that potential. And the Egyptians used the dung beetle as the example.
Yes, I love that.
Out of the dung of life, you can plant the seed of your higher resurrected self. And that dung's going to happen, and it's best you reach and touch into it and understand those weaknesses. Then you're a much stronger, enlightened person.
Wow. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions, for your being here. I deeply admire all three of you, and I consider this a really wonderful weekend gathering, and just a lot of commonalities. It's been an honor to have you here, Robert, and John, you're my brother as always, and George, a great admirer. Thank you.
Half of my coast-to-coast audience and guests are right here.
Thank you.